Welcome to another exciting episode of the Neville Goddard podcast. So I've been asking the question from the challenge, how do I love you today? And Stephanie sent me an email, and this is a way that I get to love her. Today we're going to dive into what to do when you lose your state. What do you do when you realize you've been triggered? This comes from that first week in manifestingmasterycourse.com. And I want everyone to get this. So we're going to dive into it today. But before we do, I want you to ask yourself, what do you do whenever you notice you've been triggered? Notice if your answer matches mine as we dive in to the Neville Goddard podcast. This is really good, Stephanie. So Stephanie wrote to us, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. I'm wondering what you do in the moment you realize that you've been triggered. This goes back to Manifesting Mastery Course Lesson 1 and Week 1. I was wondering what you do in the moment when you realize you've been triggered. Dropping thoughts, is there a way to make that easy? Changing thoughts without just pushing down a thought or feeling and holding it somewhere in the body. Imagining something different in the moment over and over. Thanks, I hope this makes some sense. By the way, this is awesome, Stephanie, because one of the things that shows up, we get this question often, so I figured I'd just make a recording, because we explore this in that first week, but since you're on lesson 1, you haven't got there yet. Celebrate you. Don't worry about the thought. Don't worry about the trigger. The common mistake a lot of people do is they notice that they've been triggered and then they try to cancel it. They try to stuff it down. They try to change it. They try to revise it. And you'll notice all that feels like war. And it's exhausting because as you continue to explore those week 1 lessons, you're going to keep discovering how often you do get triggered. Because Neville Goddard said there's 2 ways we can imagine. We could imagine, well, I'll use my terms, on autopilot. In other words, Neville Goddard said passively imagine, just be a reaction in the world. Or you can actively imagine. But a lot of people miss this absolute first step, and this first step has to do with the first principle. We did a live call, and it's called the Struggle Stopper. Here's the crass commercial. For like 90 plus minutes, we dove into the whole thing about the first principle, the struggle stopper. Your job is to stop and be still and then celebrate you. Because you're going to have endless meanings show up in a day. You're going to have endless triggers show up in any typical day. Neville Goddard said your state will get contaminated. It will. As soon as you can accept that, the power of this next statement of his comes into play. The state that you most commonly return to is your dwelling place. What I want you to do is to make your primary dwelling place one of celebrating you. So I don't go to war when I'm triggered. I notice a trigger. I just notice that, hey, I've got a trigger. I've got an upset going on. And I celebrate me. It's that fast. I celebrate noticing. Because as the noticer, I'm much faster than anything going to war. Because if you take your mind and have it go at war against itself, that's your mind, just your thoughts, your thinking going against other thoughts and thinking. That's your emotions going against the other emotions. It is exhausting doing it the way most people say. But here's the key. The moment you notice that you've been triggered and you stop and you be still and you celebrate noticing, your whole life changes. Because this is all about this adventure of a lifetime. This course is about discovering how vast and fast you are, how big you really are. Because you're bigger than all your wishes combined. Because yes, there are big wishes, there are small wishes. There are big upsets, there are small upsets. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar. They've gone for some bumper sticker thing. I'm telling you, some wishes are bigger than others. All of your wishes and all your desires are smaller than you. Because you're the one that has all these wishes and has all these desires, and you discover it. When you just stop the struggle, when you go into the first principle, stop and be still, celebrate you. I've got 2 suggestions today. The first one I already mentioned, the struggle stopper. Now, when I emailed you back, I didn't mention that one because it didn't pop up. But when I went to make this podcast, it did. So the struggle stopper is a live call recording. It's about 90 minutes or so. There's a little bit of swearing, but there's a whole lot of caring, and there's a load of love in there. If you want to explore how we explore this live, because it's awesome, go to NevilleGoddardStore.com and get the struggle stopper. The second one, the one that I emailed you about, is the secret of surrender. And that's the other side of this. The first thing that we do is stop and be still. The second thing we do is we surrender to something. Because if you're going to try to make something happen and make something different up, you've just joined the circus. I want you to sit back and notice that you can celebrate you. That's what it's all about. When you can celebrate, I noticed another way that I get triggered. How cool is that? You immediately exit the suck state whenever you can celebrate noticing. You automatically stop and be still. If you want to dive deep into that, the struggle stopper. If you want to dive deep into that in another way, the secret of surrender. Because both are vital when it comes to this. Otherwise, this becomes an act of willpower, an act of war. And I'm not a fan of either one of those mistakes. Stephanie, thank you for your question today. And go visit us at NevilleGoddardStore.com. And now it is the time when we go into the silence. Dive deeper, soar higher, be blessed.